Hello, and welcome to the Women in Drones Emerging Aviation Thought Leaders Summit. I am excited today to be here at the Westgate Hotel at CES 2023, and we are going to dive into a fireside chat today to discuss global perspectives on advanced air mobility. And I have my subject matter experts and guests here. Diana Cooper, who is the head of global regulatory and policy for Supernal, and Parimal Kopardekar, I got it right, also known as PK, which we'll call him for the rest of the session. And he is a director with NASA Aeronautics Research. So very excited to dive into this awesome topic and very timely too. But before we dive in, I'd like you to each introduce yourselves.
Sure, absolutely. I'll go first. I'm Diana Cooper, Global Head of Policy and Regulations at Supernal. Supernal is a part of Hyundai Motor Group, and we're developing an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, as well as the supporting infrastructure to support what we call AAM operations. In terms of my personal background, I'm a lawyer by trade, but I no longer practice. About 10 years ago, I started the first drone regulatory practice at a Canadian law firm, and then moved to the States a few years later to lead both legal and policy functions at a commercial drone company. And now, as those regulations have started to be, more fully developed, it was time to make the next move, a little bit higher altitude, bigger aircraft, passenger carrying operations. So I've been in this role at Supernal for the last 3 years.
Excellent. Very nice to have you join this fireside chat today. PK.
Yeah, and as Lisa said, my user-friendly name is PK. I have been with NASA for the last 20 years now. I am currently director of NASA Aeronautics Research Institute, and I have a couple of functions in that capacity. One is my personal research, which is focused on advanced air mobility, airspace operations, autonomy, wildland fire management, and technologies to mitigate the wildland fire impacts. So that's one. And second, in the capacity of director of NASA Aeronautics Research Institute, we seek new partnerships, collaborations, we conduct workshops, we explore trends in technology that NASA Aeronautics should consider for future. So before joining NASA, I was with FAA as a contractor and a civil servant for almost 10 years. And since then, it's been great to work with NASA. For all those who are interested in NASA, NASA is hiring. If you are interested in jobs, let us know. But it's a great place to work.
Looking for diverse talent,
yes,
right?
Yeah, always.
Back to the last panel. Okay, so we speak in a lot of acronyms in this industry. And one of those acronyms is AAM, right? So I introduced the panel as Advanced Air Mobility. AAM means Advanced Air Mobility, and we'll probably slip into that acronym speak here at times, and we'll have to clarify for the audience when we don't know what that means. So I'm going to put PK on the spot here.
Sure.
Advanced air mobility, it's kind of a broad definition. How do you define that?
Sure. So number of entities, as a researcher, I'll just give you background as to why that acronyms and the name stands for. Number of entities have tried to define what advanced air mobility is. There's no one common accepted definition across the globe. In Europe, they also call it innovative air mobility. Some people use it as urban air mobility. But advanced air mobility really refers to, and this is my personal opinion, refers to total transportation system that moves aircraft, basically that includes people and cargo, from point to point using new types of aircraft, particularly electric aircraft, and it fits into the existing airspace operations, air transportation system, as well as expands and extends to places where aviation has not reached before, rural, urban, and smaller places which are yet to see aviation. So really the advanced air mobility in that sense is to see the aviation reach every zip code in the globe.
Thank you. We need to have that foundation, I think, before we move on. So I just want to talk about myself just for a little bit to give some context here. Prior to getting into this space, I spent a lot of time with new mobility, new transportation technologies, such as rideshare and bike share and all these new transformational ways that people are going to get around town or get from one city to another city. And so what I've seen as you introduce these new technologies, you really need four things to align. And that is first, the regulations. Second, the technology. Third, the economics. The business models have to be right. And then fourth, the market acceptance. The public has to be ready. So we're going to dive in to each of these four areas and understand where are we really when we talk about AAM and the timelines. So I have a first question for Diana. We'll take the regulatory side of things. And since this is a global topic that we're discussing, and you're a global company, what are the pathways to get to, let's make it like the hardest thing, uncrewed advanced air mobility, where you're carrying passengers autonomously on these new aircraft?
It's a long, arduous path globally, but every regulator, that's looking at advanced air mobility, and there are a lot of them from EASA over in Europe, UK CAA. Over here, FAA has been working hard to work with companies on certification for the last few years as well. The real big focus for regulators right now is initially piloted operations. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, we're not at uncrewed yet. We've got to kind of figure out the more simple stuff, which also makes sense from a public acceptance standpoint. The public is more likely to get into these new aircraft and fly around cities if there's a pilot on board, because that's what they're used to. So again, that's the big focus right now. In terms of where the regulations are at, EASA has an entire regulatory framework that has been released in stages over the last few years, starting with SC-VTOL for the aircraft, and more recently with vertiport and operations and initial pilot rules. So it's easy to tell kind of where the regulators are heading in Europe. FAA has, as I mentioned, been working with companies like ours, as well as the others in the marketplace, on certification over the last few years as well. And more recently, the FAA released vertiport guidance, which is fantastic. We'll talk about vertiports a little bit more later on. The FAA has a different approach than EASA. Rather than releasing a rule, they like to work individually and really understand the technologies and capabilities of the different companies, and take their time to write a more thoughtful rule that's going to stand the test of time. And so we're looking forward to seeing a regulation coming out of FAA around 2024 timeframe. And in the meantime, they have recently released airworthiness criteria for two of the early players. So there is some guidance out there for other companies that are a little bit further behind in certification in terms of understanding where the FAA's thinking is on that.
So I think there's been a lot of emphasis on the Olympics and Paris and France making comments about having the first AAM operations. So do we see that happening, that Europe will be ahead?
I think at the Paris Olympics, there will be some initial operations. I think they'll be very limited, probably just one single route with very limited commercial operations. But France has been very focused on that, and EASA has been very focused on that mission as well. So I think we will likely see something.
What about the use cases? Are there differences? And you can, please, if you have something to say, PK, you can add to that.
No, she said it right. I think the number of use cases, of course, if you expand the definition of advanced air mobility to include drones, then you might see the unpiloted operations sooner. Obviously, beyond visual line of sight is where there's a lot of interest from industry. This is why the women in drones started. It really is a drones focus area a few years ago. So I think we're still looking forward to having the evolution of fully automated drones operating beyond visual line of sight.
So do you think it's critical to get that in place to help pave the way for AAM?
I personally think that's a really important step to show that you can operate in a safe manner with the integrated airspace, with other airspace users, helicopters, general aviation, and so on and so forth, where we can operate in an automated manner, where you don't have to visually see and drive. Right now, it's eyewall traffic management, where we want that automated system to be in place where everybody will feel assured that you can get your package or you do roof inspection in a much safer manner without having to worry about interference with any other traffic. Once we set that up, that will set the foundation to the autonomous operations, as you were mentioning before, till then, you need the pilot is there for a purpose, which is to make sure the overall safety of that flight is assured.
And you mentioned wildfires. That's something that NASA is focused on as a use case, the emergency.
Yeah, definitely. So many use cases, some of them are public goods use cases. Medical services obviously is one. Reaching to the rural areas where they don't see quick, basically transportation access or hospital access. So having that, and we've seen some examples in countries, other countries as well, in African countries, which is great to see that progress. But wildfire is a good example, and I'll give you basically what the main problem there is. If you look at wildland fires last year's top 5 fires, they costed over $1.8 billion. Top 3 fires lasted for more than 90 days each. And the way it works is basically there's aircraft flying, there's something called Air Boss, which is the real name is Air Group Tactical Supervisor, ATGS, Air Tactical Group Supervisor, sorry, ATGS is sitting and watching out of the window and monitoring and managing traffic. So helicopters and fixed wing aircraft that are dropping water and retardant, they are basically managed by manual means as to you go here, you go there, you stay at that altitude. That's how the traffic management for wildland fire works. We are trying to automate that, but you can almost instantly imagine that as soon as the visibility goes down, they stop the wildland firefighting operation from aerial means because the group supervisor cannot see it outside the window. This is where a great example of automated systems come in play. We can also have electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles come in, drop the logistics equipment the night before, where the firefighters will come in and start the operation in the morning. Just having a traffic management system as well as automated or autonomous light that's fitted with water and retardant can continue the operation. You can just imagine if you can fight fires to 24 hours a day instead of 6 to 8 hours a day that happens today. Every day. How will we change that paradigm?
So, PK, these are the stories that we have to get out, and I'm going to go a little off script, but not too far off script, but we're going to change up. I wanted to talk about technology. We'll come back to that. But market acceptance. Market acceptance is huge because we can have the technology, we might have the regulations, we might even have a business model, but if the market doesn't accept it, what do we have?
Yes, absolutely. Public acceptance is just as important as any of the other factors to come together at the right time for you to have a viable industry and a viable business. At Supernal, we're very focused on public acceptance. We're targeting 2028 for commercial operations, and so we're spending time now in local communities where we would like to have our aircraft operating in the future, like Miami, LA, and others, to really understand the local needs of the community, their concerns, find partnerships with local groups and entities that are also interested in advanced air mobility, and really thinking about making it real today for people. So one example of that is a demonstration we did of a actual vertiport installation in Coventry, UK last summer. We had thousands of people come and visit it, and Coventry is not that easy to get to. So it just shows the power of, these demonstrations. We actually showed everything from the passenger experience. We had our aircraft there. There were small drone delivery companies that were doing deliveries for people to watch. We had vehicles there to show the multimodal aspects, and even everything down to like the concessions. So what could you buy in a vertiport? What kind of food might be served, drinks? And we wanted to really demonstrate what that future looks like, and it was very successful. And so we'll be looking to do similar opportunities in the future as we lead up to 2028.
What was the success? How did you measure success?
One, the sheer number of people that came out to it was just so impressive. People really traveled to see it, and we got global coverage. I mean, even I think Architectural Design magazine featured the vertiport in it. Like, we had stakeholders that we weren't really expecting to be so interested in it, really take it up and be so excited about it, and the feedback was just so positive. It was really great to see.
I'm dying to know, is there a certain demographic that is going to be more prone to these types of services?
I think for this industry to make sense and to really provide the societal benefit, we would like it to be more of a public transportation system. So if you look at something like the New York subway, the wealthiest hedge fund managers ride along, people that are more economically challenged. We have diversity in types of users by age, income, and everything. So we would like to see that kind of a future for this new technology. That would be truly exciting to us. That said, of course, there are likely to be some early users, probably business travelers traveling from the airport to downtown, disrupting those 2-hour commutes from JFK to, Wall Street are probably initial use cases. Maybe not in New York, but in some other cities where airspace is a little bit easier.
Yeah.
I think the main points is, as Diana was saying, if we can show that it's safe, it's cost effective, and the noise footprint is low, those are the things that typically when you see all the public perception studies, those are the issues that come up in equity. Make sure that this helps the entire society. So those 4 things: equity to society, societal needs, cost, the safety aspects, and noise. And those are addressed properly through demonstrations and exhibitions and such, that we can actually convince people that this is real and it will be helpful for the society. You can almost imagine 50 years from now, if we can travel through air rather than basically road taking you to central business district, and all businesses are located in central business district. You can, which causes the gridlock on the transportation. If we go 360 degrees, then you can spread out the businesses, your living spaces, and businesses can be much more integrated with greener living, and you don't all have to use basically road system. 1 mile of road takes you only 1 mile. 1 mile of aviation land can take you pretty much anywhere.
That's a great point. I mean, having spent some time in transportation planning before getting into this space, it's really important to look at it holistically, right? How does this get integrated into the holistic transportation network? We talked about equity, and we were talking about global too, comparisons. So differences in market acceptance, and what you need to do to get different countries to accept it. Do you see some that are really more willing to accept it than maybe we are here in the US, or?
So we've seen some studies come out in Europe and in the US, and I think people are equally excited and also have some, concerns that we need to work on as an industry and the regulators in order to get them comfortable with the new technology. A lot of the similar concerns come up, noise, affordability. A lot of the, aspects that get people really excited are similar. So environmental footprint of our technology and decarbonizing transportation, which is the biggest contributor to emissions globally. So that's, really works out in our favor well. One of the things that is unique about the United States that we've seen is really the focus on equity, and for new transportation modes to really connect communities that have been divided historically through urban planning practices and policies that were really meant to, further divide certain communities and keep them from access to income earning areas where the jobs were. So rather than, building expensive bridges and roads and highways to try to connect communities that were physically divided in places like Los Angeles or Chicago and across the country, you can much more efficiently connect those communities by putting up vertiports, which are our infrastructure, our sort of heliports or airports, if you will, for our industry. They take much less time to build. They can be integrated into local transport networks easier than traditional urban planning technologies. So that's very exciting for us.
Very exciting. I mean, this is going to change the way people move around everywhere. I mean, just like we saw with rideshare, it changed everything.
Yeah.
Right? So exciting. Well, I want to get to the technology side, but you mentioned affordability. We're getting back to the business model eventually. So the technology. So we need the technology to be ready for all of this. Where do we stand with the technology readiness?
I think there are a number of items there on the technology side. One is the battery. If currently, we are looking at 60, 80 miles, 60 to 100 miles, kind of range, depending on size, weight, and all that. If we want this to be enduring system solution, then we need the battery improvements that will keep basically growth of this industry and increase the stage length of the vehicles and operation. So that's one. What we have right now will get us going, start, and then we want to keep pushing the limits of the battery technology. So that's one. Second is technologies to integrate into airspace so that we can scale these operations without overloading the air traffic control system. So that's a real critical that we have a system that allows us to scale. Fundamentally, we want to look at two phases of this. One is in the beginning, just getting the operation started on day one and sustain them, not just one and done, but we want to operate them on a continuous basis, but low tempo in the beginning as they will be piloted and limited, basically use cases and such. But when we really want to see value accrued when the scale starts to pick up, that's when the entire society benefits. So for scaling, airspace technology, airspace management is critical.
So we have UAS traffic management, that concept.
So that's
and the
concept,
PSU, which is another acronym I've seen.
Yes. So getting services by other entities in the regulatory environment of the FAA and others to basically enable these operations without overloading the air traffic control system. So that's critical. And the third piece is supply chain and manufacturing. It's also critical that you can manufacture at scale. If you look at current aviation industry, which is Boeing aircraft roughly 800 per year, we want to manufacture these by order of magnitude different, like scale of the cars. If you want to make the change happen, then that's where we want to see.
So that's crucial. Yeah, the supply chain aspect.
That's exactly what we're focused on in terms of driving affordability for consumers and making this really a product for the masses and not just a tool for the rich. Is bringing in auto manufacturing technologies and processes from car factories into aviation for the first time. So as PK mentioned, traditional OEMs in the aircraft space can only make a few hundreds of aircraft in their factories. A lot of things are still relatively manual, and the technologies are completely different. If you go into a car company, you can make hundreds of thousands, if not more, per year safely, copies of the exact same cars. And so we're really innovating in not just the aircraft and the batteries, but also on the production side by bringing in auto manufacturing. That's what ultimately will lead to scale for the industry.
Now I see the Hyundai Supernal.
Absolutely, there you go.
Okay, that makes sense to me. All right, so then the business model. So going back to the business model, so you're focused on building the aircraft.
We're focused on the aircraft and also partnering with other entities to work on the supporting infrastructure, the vertiports.
Okay, so there is this other airspace management, the energy, the power supply.
Yeah.
So all of this together needs to be economical in the end because passengers only are going to be willing to pay a certain price. You probably know what that price is from different surveys you've done, and
We have some idea, but
Okay.
we're still far out.
Yeah, I know, and I don't know if we should only look at the prices in the beginning, right? The prices over a period of time drop as the scale improves, economies of scale take place. In the beginning stages, many things may not be profitable, but they will have some clear use cases, including the wildland fire management. But slowly, as the technology improves, as your production capacity improves, then your prices will keep dropping over a period of time. So I think we need to figure out how to get through that first initial hump, where the price might look higher, but it really, over a period of time, it will be more sustainable. And just like cars and anything else, that's happened.
yeah, they've come down.
Cars, computers,
Yeah.
maybe not the cell phone, that's still expensive, but
Well, it was at one point in time subsidized, and then they changed that model. So going back,
which subsidies can work for our industry
That's
as
what I was
well.
gonna
I mean,
ask, yeah.
employers might subsidize the cost of the ticket for their employees.
Yeah.
So
on a business model perspective, then will we see some government agencies look for private public funding of
I think so, certainly for the vertiport side of things. In the omnibus package that was passed right before the holidays, we were very excited to see the advanced air mobility infrastructure planning grants be approved as a part of that. So this is a new program that authorizes US DOT to actually provide grants in the amount of $25 million over the next 2 years to state, local, and tribal government entities to do planning and construction for vertiports. And so we're very excited for this new development. We thought we were going to see it as part of the FAA bill later in the year, and sometimes
Things happen.
sometimes things move faster than you expected. So it was a nice holiday gift to the industry and to the state, local, and tribal government entities that will ultimately be the recipients of these grants.
That's great, and it's a start. It's
Yes,
just a start,
absolutely.
right? Okay, well, we don't have a lot of time here, but I do want to ask one last question. So, what is the time frame for you personally? When do you expect to get into one of these new advanced air mobility aircraft to take a ride?
So 2028 for us, that's our target. If they let me in sooner, I would love to be a test pilot, but I don't think I'll have much luck there.
I'll sit in it as soon as FAA certifies it.
FAA. All right. Well, that's a wrap. I just want to thank our special guests here, Diana Cooper and PK, for participating in today's session. Again, live not live, recorded at the CES 2023. Thank you very much.